Continue our session in the digital risk and resilient theme. Our next speaker is Mr. Kevin Shepherdson. Please welcome our next incredible speaker who will share his insight on data privacy and governance. As Evan has mentioned before, maybe he is speaking about the general things, and right now we're going to be more specialized with this session. Kevin Shepherdson is the CEO of Straits Interactive Pte Ltd and is a recognized leader in the field of data privacy and governance, having founded DPEX Network. He is also the international author of the highly regarded book, 99 Privacy Breaches to Beware of, and an authorized IAPP trainer. Beyond his work as an author and trainer, Kevin is a SkillFuture Fellow and has designed over 30 courses on data protection, governance, and Gen AI with Singapore Management University. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kevin Shepherdson to the stage. Mr. Kevin Shepherdson, the stage is now yours.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining my session. And this session is actually for those of you in leadership, and I'm aware that many of you are looking at compliance, and I believe there are also some data protection officers. Yeah. So what I would like to do here is quickly introduce myself. Basically, I run Straits Interactive. We are one of the leaders in privacy and governance. We train all the regulators in the region, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Philippines, in Thailand, and in Malaysia, Indonesia as well. So I'd like to share some of the tips that we are seeing. And for many of you, you are going to be sponsoring, you're going to be approving potential AI projects in your organizations as part of digital transformation. Yeah. So I've been working on a new book, but this is my publication whereby it didn't dawn upon anyone when data protection laws were introduced that you should make it very simple, because you want to look at it from an operational compliance perspective. So I'd like to invite all of you to think about the potential breaches, not just in privacy, but I'd like to talk about what you should be looking at in the area of AI, especially for those of you who intend to implement Gen AI in your organization. So very quickly, what I intend to do is I'd like you all to visualize whatever projects you have for digital transformation. I want you to think about the life cycle of your offerings, your services, and how the data protection laws will impact them. And then I want to switch gear to look at the impact of Gen AI on data privacy. And this is an excellent time. If you're not thought about it, you should start to look at transitioning your data protection to a data governance committee. So let me quickly share with you. I'm going to just show you a few bunch of charts, and let's make sense out of it. So folks, whatever projects you have, whatever business processes that you are looking at, every one of these, as you can see, there's a collection point. It could be your mobile app, it could be an AI app, it could be your webinar, it could be events. Notice that there's a collection point, and after that, once you collect the data, someone in your department is going to use that data, and the data will be passed across multiple departments who will be processing the data. And obviously the data will be stored somewhere. It could be on the cloud, it could be in transit, in email, it could be sent to another application. And that data obviously will be stored somewhere that needs to be protected. And the previous speaker has shared with you a lot of what to think about from a cyber security perspective. But the data will also potentially be disclosed as per the data protection laws. People have the right to know what their data is being used for. The data that you have could also be transferred to another country where there's going to data protection laws. And I think we need to be mindful that data is also disclosed outside the organization as well. So I'd like you to just quickly review and understand how the data protection laws apply. At every stage of the life cycle, there are going to be potential exposures and breaches. If you look at all of the fines that PDPC has done, and a lot of you also read about the NRIC rules, you can already see which part of it comes in. Is this failure of governance that caused the issues here that a company gets into trouble? Now, I want everyone to take a look at the number of areas that potentially you could get into trouble with the data protection law that is documented in my book, right? From simple things like no consent, from excessive use of data, example, you know about what happened in NRIC, forced consent, all the way to error in your processing. So again, you can take a snapshot of this. These slides will be made available. And you heard Ethan shared about all the potential cybersecurity issues that could haunt you based on where your data is being stored, even how your data is disposed, and obviously whether you intended to disclose the data or not. Look at all the potential issues that could haunt you. And this is where the data protection law comes in. So in case you folks may not know, a data protection law is rules that govern how you collect the data, how you use the data, how you store the data, how you transfer the data. That, primarily speaking, is what the Personal Data Protection Act is all about. So when we train the relevant data protection officers, we train the inspectors, the investigators, we basically map the PDPA obligations so it becomes operational. And as you can see here, for those of you who are familiar with the Singapore's PDPA, for example, at the collection point, there has to be a legal basis. So you get consent, you notify them, you basically use the purpose, you limit the purpose to reasonable users, and so forth, right? This is something that as leaders, you should be aware that whichever project, whatever, as long as it's got personal data, there are rules that govern how it's collected. So from a governance angle, ladies and gentlemen, you will notice that many of you will have your governance committee, which is set up by your data protection officer. But as you can see, that's not enough. You also need to look at it from a data protection management perspective. Every department head should know what the rules are, but you also need to know the principles, which is what I've gone through early on. So I hope this gives everyone a very, very quick perspective of what the data protection law is about and how you govern and how you manage it. So for those of you who took the course from PDPC, which by the way was also written by us, we actually won the tender to do it. You can see that Singapore's PDPC wants to make sure that everyone, you must know your life cycle. And as I'm going to go through this, you're going to see that AI will impact this life cycle. And the rest of it, I won't go through, but this is basically your primary areas. Now, having established what you folks should know about Personal Data Protection Act and the data flow, here's the problem. When we talk about AI, now there's a need to govern the data. And as you will see, you need to expand the life cycle to include the impact of AI. This means that all the leaders here, you need to know where the data goes. And if you have an LLM, like a ChatGPT or a machine algorithm, there are areas that you should be looking at. So before we make sense, I'm not sure everyone knows that Singapore launched the world's first Data Protection Officer Competency Framework. Notice that on the left-hand side is all about data protection. They want to make sure that all companies and DPOs know what needs to be done. But take a look at the center here. There's data governance. Only after you put data governance, then you can innovate with the data. So not many people know that the government is interested not just to be a showstopper, but to also be an enabler. So we understand that, ladies and gentlemen. Before I quickly talk about the impact of AI, or specifically Gen AI, what is data governance? So data governance, according to the ISO 38505, it's about putting together an accountability framework. And this framework is supposed to decrease the risk, as you do in the PDPA, but you also want to increase the value of the data so that you can achieve your organization's goals and objectives. Just like PDPA, you must have the governance in place, give directions to the organization. So you have your own data governance committee. You obviously have to have the implementation portion, which is the management practices. So I want everyone to think about what's happening in your organization, especially if you are in compliance, especially if you are a data protection officer. We are now moving from being perceived as a showstopper. So some of you might already agree with my statement. A lot of your senior heads will perceive the DPO and your compliance efforts as showstoppers because this one cannot do, that one cannot do. That is an understandable one because your positive intent is to make sure that everyone complies. But you can still do the same thing. But right now, what you're doing is you are enabling the organization. You're governing the data, both the value as well as the risks, as you can see here, which is an important part of the digital transformation. And we all know, and you heard from all the speakers, that underpinning this digital transformation is AI or Gen AI. So I'd like to quickly present to everyone, especially the senior management team, that whichever project you are going to approve, you got to make sure that there's a governance team in place with your own policies. You are managing how the data flows, and you should know whichever AI project where the data flows. Now, instead of the collect, use, disclose, and store, notice I added 3 more: the report, the decide, and the distribute. These are all new skills that data protection officers should have. So I'm going to very quickly explain to you before I close off, right, what you should be looking out for. So just like data protection in your normal data flow, this is where your data sets come in. So for those of you who are going to be looking at your AI projects, your collection activity could also be fraught with problems, especially if you're doing customer service. In many of my experiences, I see people dumping personal data just to feed their customer service chatbot. So take a look at all the potential issues. Where is your data being stored? Is it stored in the cloud? Yeah. Is it stored in a physical location, a staging server? But when you bring the AI in, this is the problem. So under the 38505, the report part can be manual, or it could be an automated extraction. So a lot of you would know that the AI model, we call it the transformer model, is able to predict the next word and is extracting all that data. And the information that you get out of ChatGPT is actually your report, right? It's your response that come out of it to support decision making. But look at all the many things that can be done. It could be used for surveillance. So for example, if you're going to search for cancer on a search engine, you know that the person or his relative or someone, his friend, has got cancer. But when you look at a conversation on ChatGPT, and if it's about cancer, you know the who, what, where, when, how. So you can survey, you can do surveillance, you can do inference. As you heard from the previous speaker, there's also deepfake. Now, this is the part that things can go wrong. And then once the report comes out on the AI, you're going to make a decision. Some of you may have heard this word called automated decision making. And there are rules, there are laws, especially in the EU, the GDPR, where you make a decision based on the report that is generated from the system. And now those predictions you make are going to be very key. And as you can see, you're going to distribute that information. And this is the whole life cycle for all of you to be familiar. Every project that you do, now this is a non-technical view, especially for the governance, risk management, and compliance officers, as well as for management. So primarily speaking, very quickly, you could see that your standard view of the PDPA is still the same. But now when you talk about it from a data governance angle, when you look at your business, your organization objectives, you need to be aware about report, decide. These are important areas. So can I show you now how potentially a lot of these issues could happen? So as you embark on your LLM application, which is fed a lot by your ChatGPT or your foundational model, take a look. You could be feeding unnecessary information. You could be using the biased data sets. Where you store the data is unsecured, and you could be retaining the data for beyond its intended purpose because you're actually training the model. And as you execute your LLM, you might not be able to check. And then you heard about the whole issue about inaccuracy, which you could be, you could get in trouble with the law because inaccuracy is caused, as you can see, by hallucinations, biased model, biased algorithms, and you could be making decisions out of it. And from my experience, many people are not even clear of how your model actually generates the decisions and the reports. We call it a black box, right? Some of you, and that's why you hear this concept called explainable AI. And think about it, when the report comes out, you're going to make a decision, take a look at all the risks. It's going to be impacting folks, right? From discrimination. I'm going to share you very quickly some cases before I close off. Watch out how you distribute the data. I think a lot of us are watching what's happening in the digital marketing campaigns, all the blogs and so forth. I think people are just trying to get eyeballs and therefore disseminating information. And I'm not sure you are aware that when you train a model, because it's vectorized, it's in machine code and language, we call it tokenization, it's going to be hard to remove the data after the data is trained. So just to get everyone to think, and I'm going to close up shortly, look at all the areas that can screw up. There are tons and tons of areas in my doctoral studies when I'm doing it. Look at people's voice are being stolen to train the model. A lot of you may have heard about Samsung. I think this is a warning for all of you, right? Please don't use your ChatGPT to enter all your proprietary information, because it could be used, it stores your data, it could be used to train the model. Some of you may have heard about the Air Canada's chatbot, which screwed up in terms of giving information. I gave the wrong advice, and the courts determined that the company was responsible, not the chatbot, even though they blamed it. You can see people are now using HR tools that could be discriminatory. And you're going to see a lot of chatbot providers getting into trouble when they distribute information. So take a look. This is just happened last week. I think a lady, she fell in love with Brad Pitt, only it was a fake Brad Pitt. And she actually divorced her husband thinking that Brad Pitt was really need her. She built a relationship, and look at how much she lost. And as you can see, there are a lot of providers that is collecting tons of data, right? So let me close out. I hope everyone thinks about what could go on in all of your projects. And that's why the new skills for data protection officers, the new skills for data governance officers, you should understand how the AI ethical principles will apply to address all those weaknesses, because you cannot prescribe for every single incident that happened. You can adopt the principles here. So with that, let me just quickly go back to this implementation roadmap, that you should think about how you are going to govern the AI as you execute your projects. There are useful guidelines from PDPC that you might want to use. And for the data protection officers, I invite you to take a look at the bigger picture here, where it's your 11 obligations. But when it comes to AI, that's only one aspect of it. You might also want to look at the other areas. And for those of you who are looking from a personal basis, this is your career mobility, your career advancement opportunity. This skill is missing today. You will really need to understand the life cycle. So to close off very quickly, if you are a data protection officer, you are compliance, you are a senior leader, take a look. Are you doing anything? Are you governing the data? Are you managing data? Are you managing the operations? You could be non-compliant with the PDPA. Let's look at the second scenario. A lot of people would just say, oh, I've got a DPO, but do you have a governance committee? Do you have a data protection committee? And you have no idea what the operations are. You're just a DPO in name. Let's take a look at the third scenario. And this is very often where I come across this scenario quite often. You have the DPO. The DPO knows what's going on in the operations, but guess what? There's no governance team. So if the regulator knocks on the door, you cannot demonstrate accountability, which is basically ownership, responsibility, and evidence. They will ask you for all the evidence, but there's no governance committee. And finally, take a look at this. A lot of you might find this familiar. This is what we call paper compliance. You have the governance team, you have the management, the DPO, the legal team in place, but they have no idea about the operations part because it's not implemented across the organization. So what we should do, moving ahead, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call operational compliance, data protection by design. So to close off, I leave everyone with these 5 scenarios. And if you want to learn further, we have 40 courses with the Singapore Management University. And I'd like to close off inviting all of you to attend our courses with Straits and Singapore Management University, where we have AI blended lessons, as you can see here. And for those of you who are interested, you can contact me via LinkedIn or go to Straits Interactive. And we have a Gen AI product that has got all the governance built in called the Capybara. So with that, I hope you guys have enjoyed the session, and I've exactly finished on time. Back to you, Leica.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kevin Shepherdson. I myself is using Capybara and it's very helpful for me. And yes,